watching the battle, yeah. Say what you want about me, yeah, but I'm a living in the green world, and I need the air to breathe. Some will say you gotta get your kicks by removing love from a natural chip. But metal will rust and money will burn, yeah. And on the final page I ask, were you living in the green world? And did you give some in return?
So we're here with Bark, which is a volunteer group, as most of you know, that acts as a watchdog for Mount Hood National Forest, especially keeping track of the commercial logging, the timber sales on forest land. And today we're looking at two things. One is a past victory, which is the solo timber sale, which was introduced in 1997. We're going to hike around the units that were the proposed sale and look at those. Talk a little bit about the history of the sale and the different steps that Bark and other people used to protect it. At the same time, we're talking about a new threat in the same area, which is the proposed liquid natural gas pipeline that goes all across the national forest from Malala to Maupin. And at the same time, the spin of this particular hike, as conceived by Martin and I, because we're both artists, we wanted to talk a little bit about something that's not generally considered in the scientific or legal surveys that are applicable to the timber sale program, and that is visual quality. And so we wanted to get everybody looking at the cumulative impact that a managed forest, has and what that looks like, and just get people talking about that. Real quickly, in the Mount Hood Forest-Wide Management Plan, there's something called visual quality objectives, and this is something that, I could be wrong, but I seldom see it cited in my impression is that there's no legal precedence for stopping a sale based on visual quality objectives.
Not yet.
But it's something that you see when you're flipping through the booklet, and we wanted to be thinking about these and kind of ask ourselves what these were and why they mattered. So the Forest Service calls these visual quality objectives VQOs, and what that is to them is a different ranking to designate what the visual impact should be when you're standing at a particular area. So right now we're looking across the Oak Grove fork of the Clackamas River towards Mount Hood, and Road 57 that we turned off of is what they call a scenic viewshed. And
Which is similar to a watershed,
yeah,
like that idea of a view shed.
a watershed of beauty. And so they have these various levels of visual quality: preservation, which would be like wilderness, there's no impact; retention, partial retention, and modification. And I won't lay out the percentages of impact for each of those, but since we're standing in the sun. But for example, wilderness from half a mile would be preservation, from 5 miles preservation, and then what they call the background. Anything you can see that's more than 5 miles away is also preservation. If you're on a wild and scenic river, it's a little less. It's preservation in the foreground, retention in the midground, and partial retention behind. If you happen to be in woodpecker or pine marten habitat, nothing personal, Martin.
Any woodpecker? I just saw one.
Any woodpecker or any marten, it's all modification, and then background modification as well. For Road 57, looking over the Oak Grove Fork, they want retention in the foreground, partial retention in the midground and background. And
Does retention mean retention of visual quality?
yes, it does, and it means that units should blend with natural landscape character in areas of modification. So that's the worst case scenario. So as we're looking out over the scenic vistas of the Oak Grove today, let's see what kind of blending we can imagine, and also ask ourselves about, you know, the impact, because at the worst it's supposed to be less than 25% of what you can see appears modified, and where we are it's supposed to be less than 8% or 4% over a decade. Although the Forest Service considers something no longer visually modified once it's at an average of 20 feet tall, the vegetation. And for those of us accustomed to seeking out larger areas of forest amidst plantation thins, you know, you can see a history of management across the land with the varying levels of trees. So
this is 20 feet right here. Does that mean that this is not considered visually modified?
This is as good as virgin forest as far as I'm concerned. If everyone wants to grab out their map real quick, we drove up, past some units down below, hooked around, and now we're just below this junction with 5730 and the spur road called 200. So we're going to walk into some units of solo, and we're going to walk along the road, trying to stay in the shade and on the trails when possible, but there will be some...
When you say units,
Yeah, sorry. So the original proposed sale was broken down into islands of cuts that are set aside, these older these pre-existing cuts. And so with this particular sale, which I'll talk about once we're standing in it, they were after the more mature islands of trees in this area, whereas everything else has been pretty managed already, and it needs some time to rebound before it can be valuable timber. And so most of the timber sales we encounter with bark in the Mount Hood forest are broken down into smaller units, and they're disparate, and it's an easy way to keep track of where you are because the units are marked and there's roads everywhere.
Anything you say, you create your end.
We are in Unit 10 of the former Solo timber sale. And I'll just give an overview of the history of the sale. And I would encourage Amy or Charlie or anyone else who's familiar with it to jump in, because it was hard to put things in order and remember what happened when. Solo was proposed by the Forest Service along with a sale called Borg, that's right across the drainage there, in 1997, when I was graduating from high school. And initially it was 167 acres, although it ended up in a format of 216 acres in what they designated as matrix land, which means that it is intended for timber harvesting. And as you can tell from the areas we're walking through, it is a matrix of different plantation cuts where they cut one area and then they cut the area next to it until all that's left are these pockets of older trees. And when they issued the environmental assessment that they're required to do, they had to state why they wanted to cut this sale, and they say, and I quote, "Solo contains approximately 216 acres of declining stands which have little or no connectivity to larger forest stands. These isolated blocks do not resemble a natural disturbance pattern." I agree. Unquote. So Bark took issue with the fact that they were cutting what we saw as as these last pockets of mature forest that contain old trees and species dependent on old trees. We took issue with the fact that they were cutting that to match the other plantations. We thought that was just not appropriate. As a sale is proposed, it enters various stages, and for the most part, citizens are allowed to get involved at a couple different stages of the planning process. They initially scope the sale, and then they issue an EA, and you're allowed to comment on the EA, and they're supposed to consider your comments. And so Bark was involved with this as a campaign sale early on, and leading several barkabouts. And one of those barkabouts, which is what we're on today, the second Sunday hikes, one of those barkabouts discovered a rare lichen in Unit 14, which if we have time we'll go look at today. And it's called Pseudocyphalaria rainierensis.
Oh, that one.
AKA old growth specklebelly. And it's actually quite rare, and it only grows in mature forest, and this one was growing on an old it still is growing on an old yew tree. And there's a lot of yew in this forest, and a lot of mature yew, which is kind of uncommon to see in Mount Hood. And so Bark brought this lichen to the Forest Service's attention, and they claimed it wasn't there, and we showed them where it was, and so they put a little buffer around it. And this and other data and evidence supported our case for an appeal against the sale, which was overturned. And then Bark and 3 other groups, ONRC, Cascadia Wildlands Project, and American Lands Alliance, brought the case to court. They sued the Forest Service in 2003, saying that they had not properly surveyed, they had not properly fulfilled their duties to survey for rare species and then to manage appropriately for protecting those rare species, because obviously they hadn't. And the judge agreed with us, and he issued a temporary injunction against logging in the sale. Meanwhile, the sale's progressing forward, and the Forest Service is ready to auction it off to a timber contractor, which will then take the logs. And so in the forest defense community, there was an urgent response to this, and it was auctioned off twice, initially to Thomas Creek Lumber, and they, in some snafu, were not awarded the contract, and then it was auctioned again in 2003, and Frere's Lumber bought it, and Bark was already real familiar with Frere's because they had bought some pretty controversial sales already, and they have a history of hating us. And
Mutually.
so there's two things happening at once. Bark and these other groups are fighting the case in court, and at the same time, concerned citizens mounted a direct action campaign, and we're looking at what used to be the tree sit back here in that tall tree right there. You can see the ropes going up, and it also included road blockades should the logging trucks arrive. And it never came to that because the judge issued a temporary injunction and asked the Forest Service to prepare a supplementary environmental assessment because he found that they hadn't, spent enough time surveying and managing for endangered species. And the Forest Service responded to that by issuing an SEA, and they kind of copped a little attitude with the judge and said, we did it right the first time. They didn't really provide any further information, as I recall. Is that right, Charlie?
That's true.
Yeah, they pretty much said forget about it, and the judge ruled in our favor again in 2006 and asked the Forest Service to cease 6 different sales across Oregon, both solo and Borg in the Mount Hood National Forest and other ones in Willamette National Forest and further south, including one called Straw Devil, which was another pretty contentious sale. And so that was a big victory for Bark because it had been a big campaign with lots of people from different parts of the forest community combining to protect it. And we led some victory hikes to the area, and now solo's threatened again because it was only 2007 that it was officially canceled, and then here just 1 year later, Palomar pipeline is proposed cutting through these units. It goes just outside of Unit 10 here, so you could see it from the old tree sit, and then it goes straight through Units 11 and 8. And we're going to find the pipeline route and talk more about that project and also hike along it.
Big brother, sleeping in your bed, big trouble, right upside your head. Big money, steal away your bread, take it right beneath your nose. Everybody, it's a brand new day. Ain't you tired of the same old way? Pay 'em back and soon you'll find that eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Stand up, be strong. Why take it? How long? Stand up, be counted. Let your voice be sounded. Stand up, don't you be afraid. How long, how long, how long, how long?
So maybe you're wondering at this point, what's so special about old growth, besides that the trees are big? See, you see some pretty big trees around here, but what's qualitatively different? Well, you'll also notice that there's juvenile trees, and there's basically trees of every age. Whereas in a second growth forest, all the trees might be big if it was logged a long time ago, but it still doesn't have that diversity. It doesn't have the resilience to fire. Like if a fire started in this forest, it might, be a lot more resistant to it than a plantation, where the species were all the same and they're all the same age. And then the other thing is when a tree dies in an old growth forest, you'll notice it stays on the ground. And we climbed over all these big logs, and these are key habitat for various plants and animals. Some trees can only even sprout if their seed lands on rotten wood. They can't even sprout on the soil. So this is, I mean, Solo is not a huge piece of acreage, but people are, you know, willing to go to a lot of effort to save it because it has characteristics that make it really exceptional and make it a lot different than just a bunch of big trees.
And it's a survivor. It's like seeing these last stands of mature trees. I think it's like that's scrappy. That's got pluck. It's worth sticking up.
Yeah, and how much old growth is left? Is it about 5% of the original forest
That's nationwide, though.
nationwide? So there's not much, and generally the pieces that are left are sort of containers for the species diversity. Tarp talked about this lichen, but there's all kinds of other species that really only prefer to live in old growth or will live together better in old growth. If you look around on the ground, there's just dozens and dozens of different plants. We're going to do an activity later where you have to find a plant that's weird. So I think it's important that there be some old growth left in each elevation zone, in each different ecosystem, because some animals and plants that might want to, and lichens, that might want to live up here, and this patch of old growth wouldn't live in a piece of old growth somewhere else. So it's just really important that we keep some, they're like a bank of species. It's our savings.
Well, Tarp, you said something, I don't know, either one of you would want to address this. You said something about the Forest Service said that this particular forest is different than all the forest around it. It's not contiguous with the forest around it. And wouldn't that mean that maybe there's species that are taking refuge in this forest?
I would think so, yes. And you know, they have to issue a purpose and need for every sale that they start, and sometimes they seem more plausible than other times. And you know, to hear them saying we need to cut this forest so that it matches the cuts around it, I mean, that's just a slap in the face for anybody who cares about preserving aspects of mature forest in any area.
I think you just told us that a forest at 20 feet tall is meshing. It's fully restored, or what was
By the visual quality of
visual quality? It's fully there. So a lot of the plantations around here do have 20-foot tall trees.
Yeah.
So by their own definitions of visual quality, it's
I think that anybody who can't tell the difference between that you know, plantation we were standing next to in full sunlight and this lovely mixed-age shaded grove has some attention to detail issues.
Is it the fact that the population doesn't really have time to pay attention to details, or even worse, that Congress doesn't? So they're not really watching very closely, and they just take any excuse as significant?
You know, I think that one of the reasons BARC is here is to alert more of the public about ways that they can be engaged in and participate in the management of public lands, because you know, initially the reason there is even a matrix designation is because, you know, national forest was conceived of as partially as a subsidy for the timber industry, and we're kind of saying, you know, there's not much left. Maybe it's time to reconsider that and to end commercial logging on public lands and to use it for recreation and to preserve wildlife habitat instead.
How much of a crisis will that cause for the need for forest products?
My understanding is that there's very little production in national forest lands, and that it would be pretty minor to end commercial timber sale.
So most timber is produced on private timberlands that are usually at lower elevation and sometimes less ecologically sensitive. And incidentally, the demand for timber has gone down as part of the housing crisis. So they're building fewer houses this year than before. And there's less demand for timber, so there's even less reason to be logging on public lands than there ever was.
during the peak of the current housing boom, the national forests were providing between 1.5%, 2%, maybe 3.5% of the timber used nationally. It was minuscule. It's not important. It's a non-factor, and that's during the peak of the housing boom. So, yeah, the idea of the Forest Service being a needed timber reserve or timber harvest area for the, for wood fiber production, as their purpose and need statements state over and over again, is completely ludicrous.
And they're also moving towards recycling wood and plastics into wood.
Sure, and the timber sale program has never made a profit. Not starting in the 20s, the 30s, it has never made a profit. And so running this giant sale program, which isn't needed, at a loss, is compounding absurdities.
These are called pine drops, and the interesting thing about them, they just happen to be growing right in front of where we're standing here. And the interesting thing about them is that they're not green, and that's because they can't make their own energy from sunlight, which means they have to steal it from other plants. So you really only find these under old growth trees. And if you go into a plantation like where we parked, you're not going to see these. And in fact, sometimes it's so obvious that they'll grow in a circle around the trunk of their host tree. So they're a great example of just one more species that prefers to be an old growth.
Oh, glory, careful where you trod, old story, ain't nothing but fraud. One nation, divided under God, and he's always on your side. Everybody, it's a brand new day. Ain't you tired of the same old way? Pay 'em back and soon you'll find an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Stand up, be strong. Why take it? How long? Stand up, be counted. Let your voice be sounded. Stand up, be strong. Why take it? How long? Stand up, be counted. Let your voice be sounded. Stand up, stand up, stand up.
So about a year ago, Bart got involved with this growing momentum of people who are resisting liquefied natural gas from coming in to Oregon's coast and then through Oregon to meet up with existing pipeline that serves California customers. Liquefied natural gas is this type of gas that, well, it's a natural gas from Indonesia, Iran, some other places across the Pacific, and there was a, what was it? They developed this technology that basically liquefies this gaseous stuff, and then it's easier to transport. It gets put into boats that are really distinguishable because they have these large white kind of barrels on top of them, and they get brought over to the Pacific, and they have to meet up with terminals here to regasify it so then it can be sold as natural gas to consumers. So California banned LNG because of the security risks of it being, mostly it had to do with security risks. It becomes a terrorist target. There were also some environmental concerns. What my understanding is Governor Schwarzenegger came out, it was safe for him to come out against it because there are these pretty significant terrorist threats. So they kind of looked for other opportunities. There were some terminals that were built down in Baja, and then they looked towards this little scrap of land called Oregon, north of California, to find some other places for terminals, thinking it would be very easy. You know, they'll go to the coast of Oregon where they've been losing all this money from the loss of logging, and people will embrace it as an economic opportunity, and it's pretty much hit nothing but resistance, which has been really encouraging to see that, you know, Oregon does have this understanding that people's safety and the environment is should be a priority over corporate profit. And so that movement has been building for several years a lot, and it's been mostly led by affected landowners. The terminals themselves would be land that would be, some of it would be taken from people, and then the pipelines that connect, the infrastructure that supports those terminals, also is using eminent domain to come onto people's land. So at the beginning, it was really this movement of all these landowners who were affected by this and sort of pulled together to look at what the options were to stop it. And then they started basically shopping around to environmental groups and other advocacy groups to say, you know, we need help. And for a lot of movements of resistance, that's a really scary moment, because you could be really easily co-opted by a very large organization that wants to kind of have the glory for themselves. And what was a really amazing thing is that these landowners were so well organized and were so communicative between each other and their different towns, that when the groups came in, it was kind of like, including groups like Bark, we were kind of like, wow, we have something to learn from these people. We can't just come in and say, this is how we're going to do things. So, but I got involved because I actually got invited to come out and kind of speak to a group of them and talk about what it's like to do place-based organizing, which is what BART considers, you know, that's our work. We focus on Mount Hood and we keep people focused on an area. And so we were talking about how do you build up, you know, love of a place, because that can really help with your advocacy and with your issue. And I was so inspired by the way that they had organized that I came back and said, you know, there's a part of the pipeline that goes through Mount Hood, and I think we should try to help with this effort by getting involved and do what we can as really strong advocates for Mount Hood. And so BARC has been really involved with the coalition, but I think what has been really good for us is that we stand very strong on Mount Hood issues because we know Mount Hood. We've walked these forests, we've walked this timber sale how many times, and we know it as well as a landowner knows their own land and can be strong advocates for that area of the pipeline. So in that way, it's been this really exciting resistance movement growing, and we're frankly honored to even be part of it. And it also makes me feel really hopeful. So about five months ago, I was getting cabin fever in the office and starting to think about what we could do this summer for some of our work, and we always do some ground truthing stuff, so I started thinking about like what are some creative kind of ground truthing stuff we could do, and I started thinking about the pipeline, and I came up with the idea to walk the whole thing. I feel like there's this really wonderful history of people doing long walks as part of a protest. You know, there's been a lot of people in history who have sort of done that, and I kind of thought, you know, we could do that. We could kind of take that essence, that thing where somebody says, I'm just going to walk the whole darn thing, and people are immediately like, well, why would you do that? And then you have that question and you can answer it, and that's a great opportunity to do some education. So I took this opportunity to start thinking about how we could walk the entire pipeline. The more I looked at the maps, the few maps we could get, the more I realized it was going to be a really huge feat, and we couldn't just do it, you know, over a weekend. So I started organizing some people who might be interested in coming out with us, and got some help from the landowners who were really excited to hear that we might be doing this, because they knew that when you are talking about somebody's land, it's that person that's affected, but when you're talking about public lands like we are standing on right now, that's owned by everybody, the affected landowners becomes a lot bigger, right? It's everybody. So a lot of people helped me with this and helped organize it, and then I had this idea, I don't know, maybe 2 months before we left. I was thinking, okay, well, we need to make sure we take lots of pictures, because whenever you're out documenting an area, getting pictures of it is really important. It's sometimes hard to remember everything when you get back. But one of the things that BARC's learned over the years is how hard it is to take a picture in the forest. I don't know if anybody's ever played around with that, but taking a picture in the forest is basically like taking a picture of a lot of light, and a lot of different kinds of light, and then a lot of green. And those two things playing off often makes a really difficult picture to really explain what you're looking at. So I consulted the artist in the family and asked, you know, what color would show up really strong, and orange shows up really strong, which is maybe why they chose orange to flag this whole thing against green. And so we started playing around with the idea of putting some orange in to the pictures so that we could see what it is that's being affected. And so I traveled with this thing while I was walking, and every day, a couple times of the day, would set it up so that you could see everything behind this piece of fabric will be logged. We decided to just do 50 feet of the fabric because I wanted to make sure that if at any point Palomar was able to say, well, that's an area we're only putting at 50 feet, then we wouldn't have had a picture of 100 feet. But this way, there's no way that it's going to be less than 50 feet when they construct this thing. It will be more than 50 feet of clear cutting at any point. And so I want to be in a position where if they start to question this project, we can say, oh, well, maybe actually it's bigger than that. Sorry, we didn't get all the trees in the shot. So I'm going to set this up here because I think that we've got some old growth trees here, some downed wood, and it just seems like a nice image that I think would be really good to capture. People can kind of set for a minute while I get it set up. It's kind of doesn't take too long.
I thought of this project just to help you kind of get down and dirty in the forest and find something you've never seen before. So I'm going to assign each of you to find a plant that you don't know what it is, you've never seen it before, you can't name it, and I guarantee you that even the botany experts here are going to be able to find something, because there's just hundreds of different plants with, you know, just right here, I guarantee it.
And then draw the plant.
And then draw the plant. And so, even if you think you're not very good at drawing, you're wrong, so just do it.
Yeah, we're not looking for draftsmanship here.
So, and like my one tip for drawing is spend more time looking at the plant than at your paper. And try to, you know, capture the details.
So
and
that
then,
you can identify it later
exactly.
from your drawing, right?
And then we'll get together and see what we have and try to identify the plants.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll gain an appreciation for just how much different stuff is out here.
So there's paper and cardboard backs. I think there's enough.
And don't pick your plant. Like, leave it in the ground and dry it.
Good point.
1, 2.
Good idea, guys.
It was very dark green, but it had white spines
In the leaf.
in the leaf. So it was a very dark leaf with white in it. It's really cool. I got Oregon grape.
Oregon grape.
Excellent.
I drew a rhododendron that I didn't realize was a rhododendron.
For our last half an hour, we're going to drive back down the road to Unit 14 that we passed on the way in and take a quick look at the old growth speckle belly.
I'm a lover, not a hater. I'm a lover, not a hater. Can't you see? Can't you see? In my eyes, they're at peace. There's no war to be had. There's no war to be had from me. I'm a lover, not a hater. I'm a lover, not a hater. Can't you see? Can't you see? In my eyes, they're at peace. There's no war to be had. There's no war to be had from me.
So I just want to thank everyone for coming out here, and we just saw a black bear in the middle of the road.
You guys did it just now?
Yeah.
All right.
Way down here. That was an unexpected tree, and every time I come out to this area, it feels special. But I don't know. I think that along the pipeline route, it hits some places that were, you know, you got to pick your battles, and but this goes through so many places that it really sealed the deal for a lot of people, including myself, to decide to fight against it. And for me, just the fact that it's going through a sale that some people just worked 11 years to stop.
I guess I just noticed today, because it's so hot, always reminds me like how old growth pockets are really like a sanctuary. It's so much more comfortable in here than when we were walking along the road. And I think a hot day just like points to that.
I want to reiterate what Tarp said and thank everybody for making the effort to come out here. I know it's a really long drive, but the reason that we do these hikes is to come out and witness the forests as they're standing, and it makes you a better advocate. I was sharing this in the car ride up here, but I recently went out with the Forest Service for a field trip, and they kind of write us off sometimes, and a lot of the times, and say we don't know what we're talking about. And what was really interesting to me is how excited they were to talk about my hike and what I saw, and they had so many questions for me, asking me as though, I had information that they didn't have, and I just can't, I feel so much more empowered recently to the idea that if you get out into these areas, you become a better advocate for them. And so everybody is going home, and I want you all to know that this is like showing up to volunteer for something. I mean, I know it doesn't feel like we did much, we just went for a walk, but you can check this off for your good deed for the next couple weeks, because any conversation you have about today is not just about going on a hike, it's also being in a forest that's threatened right now, and that's a really powerful statement to make when we're back in the city and people can't be there to see this, so thanks.
Well, I want to thank Bark for this chance. I really got a good sense of place, and I enjoyed being with everyone. I enjoyed the chance to experience it with my son, so thanks for making it family friendly.
Did you have fun?
Yeah.
Great.
Did you learn any new plants?
Yeah.
Did we ever figure out what your plant was?
Yeah.
A current.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Well, I don't really get out into nature as often as I'd like to, and I think of things like campgrounds, which are sort of natural, but also, pretty engineered by man to, be what they are. But being out in the old growth forest, this is like true wilderness that humans haven't really been in very much. And we see the orange paint on the trees and stuff, but there's not really any signs of civilization here. So it's interesting to be in like real untrammeled wilderness.
I thought it was pretty cool how we got to see how where the pipes would actually be going and where you'd have to lose the land.
I live in Portland, but when I look out past the Willamette River, I see Mount Hood. And, I've never been to Mount Hood until today. It took me 6 months to actually get out here. But, yeah, I agree with you that it's just 100% wilderness. And there's a difference between being here and enjoying the solitude that it provides as opposed to the city.
It's just really good to see in person, there is so little of this left in the area, and it seems like it's just so ridiculous to bring such a major project like a pipeline through here that we don't even really need at all as an excuse to continue logging, continue destroying the area. So it is, I think, really valuable to see it in person. So
I'm continuously impressed with the hard work everybody puts into this. The Tarp and Martin putting together the hike, Jim putting together the video, all of you all showing up and taking a day and driving out here. It's a sense of place. This is part of that sense of place.
I really appreciate being here, and again having Martin and Carolyn and all of you get me here or help to get me here, and again bringing the abstract LNG proposal into the here and now, and it's real and it really will affect real things. I think really helps and solidifies my work and what we're doing.
Thanks for all of your information. It was so awesome to be with you in the car and hear about all the stuff that's going on, and to hear about why timber companies would have an incentive to come on public land. It's really amazing. I've always thought of like national park as like kind of preserving things, but it's actually like cheaper for them to come here, which is crazy.
Well, I was really excited to learn a new plant today. That was really fun for me, and to sit down and draw it was a good time. Not something I normally do out in the woods, but time well spent, I think. And once again, to see another gorgeous place that the pipeline is going to plow right through is pretty upsetting. And I'm also really excited because I love lichen, and seeing this famous lichen is very exciting to me.
Generally with one of these hikes, we will focus on a single sail and write letters in response to it, encourage people to take action around it. So I wanted to end on the note by, did you want to add something about staying involved with?
No, go ahead, sorry.
Just end on a note of encouragement to get people to rally against this LNG project.
Well, I was going to also say that right now our target is the governor. He still has the opportunity and the power to stop the whole LNG project and potentially its infrastructure like the pipeline. And so actually you can go on our website, and there is a link to be able to write a letter, and there's talking points. You can use the piece of paper that we handed out earlier to put together talking points. Or actually what we're finding is really effective is just to write, and what you can do is write the letter and then push this button and it emails right to the governor. And actually we find it's really effective if you actually say you went out to this area, you have seen this area, and you talk about what you saw. Don't get too hung up on the nitty-gritty of the project. I mean, you know as much about this part of the project as anybody now, so we've been at one. So.
Also, just over the next week, as you talk to your friends, just tell them what you saw out here.
Yeah.
And encourage them to come out on a bark hike next month.
Nothing is left untouched these days. Powerful men seek to die, gather with their flitting smiles and make plans. At the breakfast propaganda eating table, they make plans on how to gather all their wealth. It's really oh so seductive, nothing else matters. I said nothing is left untouched these days. Powerful men see to that they get their way. They are poisoned by something artificial, so they seek to change all of us to be, to think, to shit like them. Nothing is left untouched these days. Our riches are so thin these days, and they're easily lost, so paranoia sets in. We must have more